Hello everyone, welcome along to the Event Industry News podcast. My name is James Dixon, wishing everybody a very good morning, afternoon or evening, wherever or whenever you are tuning into us from. Today's podcast is brought to you by our sponsor, Engage, powered by D2I Systems, winner of Best Event Management Platform at the 2017 Event Technology Awards. To learn how Engage can make your business more profitable, visit d2isystems.com/engage. Welcome along, everybody, to today's podcast, and welcome back to Mr. Rob Murdoch. Rob is the founder and MD of Exposure Analytics. Rob, welcome back to the podcast today.
Thank you, James, and thanks for having me back.
No problem at all. For those of you who have seen Rob on the podcast before, if you reference back on Event Industry News in June this year, back in June, we did a podcast with Rob talking about his company Exposure Analytics and what these guys do within the marketplace. A little bit of recapping to do following on from that. But first, Rob, let's just put very briefly into context what it is that Exposure Analytics do for anybody who hasn't listened to that previous episode.
Exposure Analytics delivers footfall analytics for brands, agencies at live events. So any event that can happen across the world, we can measure the footfall and help work out the success of the event based on the footfall. We can sorry, James. Sorry. We can do real times, movement, hotspots, heat maps, and also demographics of people as well that are attending your event.
And just to sort of but not back up as such what Rob said, but what might be useful for anybody who's now listening to this podcast who hasn't listened to the previous episode, I would perhaps recommend pausing this one now, going back to June this year, diving into that first episode, because in that we talk a bit about how the actual technology works. Rob gives us a very good insight into how the technology actually produces the analytics and the data and the reporting that he's just referenced. So it would be well worth, before continuing today's episode, going back and referencing that if you weren't on the original episode and picking it up from there, because it will flow nicely into where we are now today. And as I said, 6 months ago, we first spoke to Rob and we got him on the podcast. 6 months down the line, a lot of things have happened with the company. At the start of November 2018, Exposure Analytics picked up 2 awards at the Event Technology Awards in London: Best Use of Wireless Technology and Best Use of Technology for Event Analytics and Data Collection. On top of that, the company have recently released some statistics showing that they've serviced 1,000 events in 2018 alone. That's comparable to having worked with 1,000 events in their previous 4 years of operation. So you've seen a significant jump, haven't you, Rob, and some real success over the last 6 months alone.
Oh, most definitely. It's been quite amazing, really. Winning the 2 awards, I'm really pleased for the team, because we've got a great team around us, and it was for them and for the products that we have, and it was excellent. And then, you know, the growth of the business, having done 1,000 events already in 2018, it was just amazing. We were like, blimey, we've hit that. We also hit 2 billion lines of data in our databases, which did sort of break it a bit. The guys, they didn't lose any data or anything like that, but it's quite a mammoth feat to have 2 billion lines worth of data.
And I suppose that just those figures alone, 2 billion lines of data, is a sort of figures that people may struggle to actually comprehend. You know, when you start talking about 2 billion anything, it's a figure really that is gigantic.
Our technical lead said to me, he said, the only other company knew that this happened to, and there probably are other companies, was YouTube, when Gangnam Style hit 2 billion views and it broke YouTube.
So there we go.
Trap music.
Comparable to Gangnam Style now. The technology that we're talking about, and again, I don't want to have to dwell too much, having looked at it in the past, in the previous episode, Rob, about how it works. But in a nutshell, for those of you listening today, we're talking about wireless devices, I think we can call them, that can be applied in event spaces, and you can apply multiple devices in any given event space. And what those devices do that Rob and his team set up allows event organizers to track very, very accurately and see very accurately what the numbers were, not just in the overall event space. You know, a lot of people can clock numbers that are coming in through the door and out the door, but we're talking about where they were and how they moved within any given space. So we can see heat maps, we can see hotspots, we can see all sorts of really insightful data that can help an organizer see what's happening. And there were two things particularly that I noted ahead of today's recording, Rob, that I'd like to talk about. And I suppose it's the two sides of the exhibitor-organizer relationship at something like a trade show. As I see it, you have two distinct sides to the coin. Exhibitors who have exhibited perhaps at a show for many, many years, they have a trust and a loyalty to those organisers, and they pretty much take anything that's given to them at face value when it comes to figures, when it comes to facts and stats related to a show. On the other side to that, you may have exhibitors who are new to an event and who have that element of doubt in their mind, that sort of trepidation of committing budget towards exhibiting at an event and whether or not they should put complete faith and trust in the figures that are being given to them. I'm curious to know how each side of that particular argument is supported by the data that you guys are now generating for people.
Okay, so you mentioned trust there, and we did an event in October, I think it was, at the Baftas, where we invited some industry potential customers, and we had customers speaking to those people. One of them was from a large electronics manufacturer, medical machinery. They spend 90 billion odd euros a year on exhibitions, and the head of events there said he does not trust event organisers with the data that they present him. Because event organisers seem to think they need to tell you you've got loads of people coming through the door. And they think big numbers is important. Well, big numbers isn't important. It's the quality of people and the truth, the facts. People want to act on truth and fact. And if you've been bamboozled with figures and said, well, we've had 100,000 people come through the door today, and you stood there and well, I didn't see them. Where do they come from? So our data will give you the first-hand insights into what's actually happening. And it's a sad reflection, really, that event organisers, not all event organisers, but some event organisers do feel they've got to increase those figures because that's what they think people want to hear. So on both sides, whether you're a new exhibitor or an existing exhibitor, they're treated the same pretty much.
And when you mentioned that event that you did at BAFTA and you invited potential clients as well as existing users to support the work that you've done and with their own projects, this is technology that can be used and deployed by an event organizer, but also by the exhibitors themselves. There's no hard and fast rule as to who should be using it, is there?
No, there isn't. And if I'm honest with you, the majority of our customers are exhibitors. We do a lot of experiential activation. So at the moment, we're at King's Cross with Tiffany and the 43-foot high Christmas tree they got there. We're doing something with Paco Rabanne. But the exhibitors at an exhibition, we work mainly with the exhibitors. A lot of event organisers don't see the benefit of what we present, which is a shame because when we do work with event organisers, they get it and they love it. Event organisers, their budgets, we're always being told their budgets are very tight and, we're not sure we can afford that. But the data they can get can earn them extra revenue because, some exhibitors will say, I've had nobody come past my stand. Our data will reflect whether they have or they haven't. If they've had a bad show, it might not be the fact that the footfall was low. It might be the fact that they just didn't have a very good stand. And that's the case.
And on that subject, I was fortunate enough to be at that event at BAFTA that you guys ran and see sort of firsthand and hear firsthand some of the scenarios there. And one thing that one of the gentlemen that I met there said was that they were actually using the technology on a daily basis, not just as a post-event analytical device, but actually on a daily basis to look at where people had interacted on their stand. This is a company that has a very, very large presence when they do exhibit at events, and we're talking hundreds of square meters of exhibition space, and they were actually using it, weren't they, on a daily basis to actually see how they could manipulate and change their stand day to day to make sure that people were flowing correctly.
Very correct, yes. I mean, they can sometimes spend more on a stand than an event organizer will spend on the whole show. That's the different sort of budgets we're talking about. But yes, they present our heat map and flow to their brand ambassadors and people who are working on the stand each morning and say, right, this MRI machine didn't have many people on it. Can we make sure we're pushing more people to that? Or, there was a blockage there. Let's make sure that's sorted. Let's make sure they follow the route round that we've planned for the exhibition stand as we want them to. So yes, every day they're using that data.
And how, since we last spoke 6 months ago and looked really at the overall methodology and what this technology that you guys supply can actually deliver, how has the actual interpretation of the analytics changed and developed? Because there will be an awful lot of information that is available to people, and what could be quite easy is for them to get not necessarily confused, but just have so much stuff presented to them that they can't actually interpret it in a clear way.
Yeah, so we within the portal we believe, and we are complimenting it for our customers, that we do present that data in a concise way. So it's not pages and pages and pages of spreadsheets. It's graphics, and it's just diagrams that are showing them how it's working, and numbers obviously, but it's a visual thing that they get from us rather than just number crunching. So it is important that our guys, after the event, we do a post review with the clients. Say, right, do you understand this? Look, there was a spike here. What were you doing on your stand then? Oh, yeah, we had Ollie Murs on the stand or something like that. I'm dropping all the pop references today, aren't I?
Yeah.
So it's very important that we go through that with them, or they have an insights person that can interpret that data. Because a lot of people, I hear this a lot, that there's so much data out there. What are you actually doing with it? Are you using that data? And most people just aren't. They're just saying, well, oh, we've done the analytics. But what have you done with it? Try and interpret.
I hear an awful lot, so certainly with a podcast. You know, we speak to a lot of technology companies and a lot of people who have platforms or systems that generate data. You know, in its simplest form now, every event organizer is using some sort of digital platform to help manage their events and collate event registrations or send out invitations. So everybody has got a certain amount of electronic data available to them. And the more and more we generate, the more and more difficult it can be sometimes to actually interpret all of that. And certainly in terms of making it presented, having it presented with graphics and images and easy to understand stuff, I think brings it back down to its simplest level
Yes.
when it comes to actually identifying what's worked and what hasn't worked.
Yeah, the mistake people make is you've got a lot of complex information there. If you present it to them in a complex way, they're just going to run away from it. So we simplify that data. Still complex at the back end, but the way we present it is a nice, simple, easy to view format.
Sure. When just referencing the two awards that you won, I mentioned at the start of the episode that that at the Event Technology Awards at the start of November, you guys picked up Best Use of Wireless Technology. Obviously, the actual hardware that you guys deploy is wireless. It can be deployed, you know, pretty freely with any given space. And Best Use of Tech for Event Analytics and Data Collection. Beyond the data collection aspect, there's a data management aspect, and you mentioned the sort of 2 billion lines of data. How difficult is it to manage? Is it not difficult at all, but you have to be very, very careful with it? How does it work once you've collected it in actually managing that data?
So we store everything on AWS. So most people use AWS, Amazon Web Services. So yeah, it's all up there, and we could just spring up another instance when we need it. So if we've got a lot of events going on at any one time, we'll spring up extra instances to keep that running. And then the storage is just there. I mean, obviously storage, the price of storage keeps on coming down. So, you know, we're managing that. What we don't want to do is costs go spiraling out the way. We have to put our prices up to our customers. So it's managing those all aspects, because we keep the data on the platform for our clients to review their data. So an important thing is comparing past events. So if we just got rid of the data, they wouldn't be able to compare them. So it's, you know, if we do an event in Berlin this year and we do it again next year, they can compare to see how well they did, what changed, was the weather different, all things like that.
Sure. And do you think that are you already identifying that because of the leap that you guys have had in the sheer volume of events that you're working with now in 2018 compared to those the previous 4 years, are you now even more confident in being able to generate year-on-year data and being able to reference, obviously, the more events that you work with, the more opportunity you guys have got as a company to be able to reference event to event what worked there, what didn't work there, and actually offer that back as advice to your clients?
Yeah, it's not something we've offered, and it's something we've been considering and looking at, because we have so much data on events, and we can we are looking at areas where we can do that and manage that data and monetize it really, and see what we can do for our clients. To say, if you're looking for a place to go, you want a perfume brand that you're going to be promoting, where's the best places to go? Because I think I said it in the last podcast we did. You get numbers from, if you're doing a shopping centre tour, you'll get numbers from the shopping centre, which, quite frankly, are just rubbish. If you half it and half it again, you're not even close to what the real number is. So you're using our data, rather than going to the shopping centres and say, what's your numbers going to be? We can compare the data and say, right, Birmingham will give you this, Glasgow will give you that, Northampton, Nottingham, wherever.
Yeah.
And we do it in all weird, wonderful places.
I'm curious to ask, and I don't know whether or not you'll know this off the top of your head, but when you entered for the Event Technology Awards, and you obviously subsequently won them, you'll have had to reference particular projects, and no doubt projects that you guys have really delivered significant results for those particular clients. Obviously aligning that to the event that you did at Bafta, where you had users coming in to talk to potential users to give their case studies and their examples. What are some of the highlights for you so far this year, and what sort of real impact have you made with certain clients that you're allowed to talk about?
That's a good question, that is, yeah. We did a job for Canon at Photokina, and Canon have a camera system they use for counting, which they don't deploy. I think they do deploy it a fair bit, but they put it in conjunction with our platform. And going back to the visitor numbers at the event organisers state, the two systems, ours and the camera system, were almost identical with the numbers we presented. And right. The event organisers were probably, I don't know, 300% more than we were. Goes back to this trust thing, doesn't it?
So it's provided genuine hardware. And what another curious thing to ask about the camera comparison with your system at the moment, using the wireless devices that you've got, are interacting with mobile devices that are pinging out requests to try and connect to networks and things, and you're able to actually track numbers by actually pinging and connecting with mobile devices. The camera will actually use some sort of recognition, presumably, to count people that are there. Where does the camera system stand from a security and an anonymity aspect by comparison to the hardware that you guys deploy?
So there's two camera systems that we have. There's Aperture, which is a facial detection system, and that will look at people's faces, tell us their age, gender, and mood. There's quite a lot of companies out there doing this now. And then we have Apex, which we launched at EventTech Live at the beginning of November. Apex is a stereoscopic camera system that sits above the stand or walkways or entrances to your stand and counts people in and out. So one of the things about measuring Wi-Fi devices, not everyone has Wi-Fi enabled, and we overcome that with what we call a coefficient. We set the coefficient to match the amount of people with Wi-Fi enabled, and that again is down to our experience. With over 2,000 events, we know what that number will be, or what that percentage will be. Mm-hmm. So the two camera systems we have with the EX sensors, which is the Wi-Fi sniffing sensors, they all work in conjunction together, just to offer an all-round package. So rather than standing still and say, oh, we have a product with these sensors, we've looked at developing other products as well. Mm-hmm. And with the facial detection, because we're just detecting a face, we're not looking at it, we're not storing any image, we're okay with the data protection side of things. If you're doing facial recognition, then it's a whole different kettle of fish with GDPR.
Sure. And does the just to delve into a little bit more the sophistication on the camera side of things, you mentioned that from a recognition point of view, it sounds like you can set certain criteria or variables in there so it will identify, broadly speaking, the age brackets that somebody maybe falls into based on their
detection,
face.
Not recognition.
Yeah.
Important to stress in that, detection. So yes, this Aperture system will tell us age, gender, mood, whether they've got beards, glasses, and things like that. So you can trigger messaging if you've got digital displays or digital information there, the cameras above it, if your audience, say 70% male, we can change the digital messaging. Well, we can give you a prompt, and then it's down to the agency to change that messaging, which is quite important, quite a good feature to have, to change your messaging depending on the audience that's watching it.
Mm. And presumably as an organizer, if you take into consideration an agency that's delivering an experiential event for a brand, they're selling a new product and they've got space within a big shopping center or in a train station somewhere, and they're wanting to engage with a specific demographic of people, they will set those variables in advance. They will set that demographic and say, these are the people we want to target. And it sounds like this type of system, added to the actual numbers that your original system can generate, with the camera enabled as well, they're actually able to see how many people within that demographic came past and subsequently how many they were able to interact with.
Yes, you can theoretically do that, yes. We haven't really done that as such, but yes, it can be done.
Okay. I mean, it's interesting to ask because there's another phrase that springs up all the time on the podcast and within the industry, and that's ROI, return on investment, or return of investment. And people have banged on about it for years, and we can demonstrate return on investment. And I had one guy actually on the podcast a couple of years ago who said there's really actually no such thing. In his opinion, there was no such thing as return on investment. It's immeasurable. You know, you can have business from an event that might come to you in 5 years' time. You know, do you trace that back and say, well, that was definitely part of exhibiting at that particular event? But I suspect with systems like this, the whole subject of ROI is getting a little bit closer and a little bit more manageable, so people can justify it.
And I think the people we're talking will talk about ROMI, return on marketing investment. And they live with these TLAs and everything like that. But yes, for myself. So we ran this event at Bafta. It cost an awful lot of money to put on because we took 40 people fine dining and a 7-course tasting menu, which we will be doing another one next year. We're just going to be planning the dates in January and working out when we're going to do it. So if anyone's listening to this and thinks they should be attending, please let us know. There you go. There's a plug for that. So for me, I needed to work out, was that event successful? And what is success? For me, it was, did I get my money back plus some? And we did. We landed an order from a client shortly after the show that was at the show, and it basically paid for the show. And then we've had other business come in, which has bumped that up. So we set ourselves a target that we wanted to hit by December. If we did that, we'll be doing the event again. And we've done that target, so we will be doing the event again. So yes, return on investment is achievable. You've got to know what your parameters are. I suppose you can't say, you've got to have a figure in mind. What's it got to be? Whether it's the amount of leads you get, whether it's the amount of footfall that you have. And we've done a link in with a company called Sales Stratus, and they pull an API pull from us to take data from us. So they do lead capture at events.
Yeah.
Very good. There's lots of companies out there, but we worked with these guys and really like what they're doing. Now, from that, we can work out a formula for this amount of passing people to this amount of engaged people equals this amount of engaged.
Right.
This amount of engaged leads to this amount of leads. So then a business or an exhibitor can then say, right, well, we've got 100 leads, and they'll know from their business that 100 leads might lead to 10 orders or 1 order, I don't know, but every business is going to be different. But there are ways and criteria that you can set out to say, is this a success? Am I getting return on my investment? So your chap 2 years ago said there's no such thing. I know where he's coming from. He says, well, I might get an order in 5 years' time. Yes, that's true. But that's 5 years' time. You're not going to make a decision whether you're going to exhibit next year in 5 years because it's gone. So you've got to find some criteria measuring that event.
Sure. And I think that up until relatively recently, if we look in the history of live events and how long people have been going to expos, trade fairs, conferences, call them what you will, an awful lot of detail and planning goes in pre-event, whether you're an exhibitor or an organizer. If you're a really well drilled exhibitor, you will spend loads of time planning your stand. A lot of design will go into where you're going to put stuff, what it will look like, how it's going to be there. You plan every last detail, and then at 9:30 a.m. on day one, the doors open and you then just leave it in the hands of the gods. And that's really what the way I see it. It's been like that until relatively recently in the industry. It's then just a case of, right, let's see who walks through the door and see what we get from it. And you've got all of this analysis and planning that goes into it beforehand. And then, for the period that the actual event is operational, seemingly well, let's see where the wind takes us type approach in some respects. And it does strike me that not just with your own company, but there are more and more offerings coming into the events industry that's helping us, actually really delve down into the analytical side of things and see who was there, how they interacted, where they moved, what they did, how they did it.
Yes, yeah. I mean, talking about more and more people coming in, we've had competition this year. People have sprung up that are competing, have competing products with us. I love it. I think it's great because before, we were having to educate the market that this can be done. Now we've got people coming along talking about what we're doing.
Sure.
And it's interesting the different scales that you have. You've got your low end, you've got your high end, you've got your middle of the road companies. And we lost a deal the other day. We don't lose many. We lost a deal to a company that was charging £40 for the event. It was I put it into context. It was a 10-day touring activation. They charged £40 for it. And we got a phone call after the first 2 days saying, this ain't working. What do you expect for £40? Yeah. So there's competition out there. There's competition. So you've got to be careful.
Indeed, but as a broader subject and as a broader sector now within the industry, as you said, competition is good because where in the past, if you've had difficulty convincing people, whether that be exhibitors or organisers, as to whether or not this technology can benefit them, more companies mean more people who are trying to sell it. More people trying to sell it means a bigger awareness of that particular sector within any given industry, which means that hopefully the people you're trying to convince are actually taking a bit more note. They're thinking, well, actually, there's a few companies doing this now. It must be something that's a growth area. It must actually be working in some respect.
Yes, most definitely. And we've just seen the business grow and grow, and the leads coming in just growing and growing. To complement Event Tech Awards, winning those awards, it's some people are a bit sceptical about winning awards, but for us, it's actually led to several leads. I think in the last week we've probably had 20 leads come in, and it's all from the Event Tech Awards. So we're really pleased with that. The Event Tech Live, I think we had over 180 leads. It's 162 leads actually, coming from Event Tech Live. So yes, there is competition out there. There's people talking. There's a buzz. There's a feel that people are interested, and we're seeing more and more people come through the doors to us.
Absolutely. And operationally, just as a business, how have you had to adapt in the last year, in the last 6 months, in the last few weeks, just because of this growth that you've experienced? I'll reference them again. On your own website, you've recently published figures that said that up till now in 2018, and we're recording this at the end of November, depending on when this episode gets published, You've worked with 1,000 events in 2018. In your previous 4 years of operation, it was 1,000 events. So you've done in 1 year what you've done previously in 4 years.
Yes.
That has an impact on any business, regardless of what it is you're actually doing. Operationally, that's going to have an impact.
Yes. So the biggest thing is stock. Believe it or not, we've designed the product so that our customers can self-install it.
Right.
So it keeps the cost down. So if we send somebody to the site, we're going to charge a lot more for it. So some of our customers choose to self-install. So we're a sort of logistics company in a way, posting out sensors and sending them back and waiting for them to be returned to us. So having the product fine-tuned so it's easy to deploy is very important. If it takes you 2 days to deploy it, then your costs are going to go up, and it'd be a nightmare to do. If we had to go and install all those 1,000 events this year, we would be probably bankrupt because we'd have to have loads and loads of people doing it.
Sure.
We've developed it so it's easy to use and easy to self-install.
Okay.
So that, more salespeople, and we run quite a tight ship. I was looking. We employ 7 people full time and 5 people part time. So we're not a big organisation in numbers, but with the cloud and everything like that now, and everything being up there in the ether, it's quite easy to develop your platform to make it that simple to use thing.
And I suppose that brings it back to making it accessible for people, not just with the analytics and the data that's generated, but with the actual hardware itself. People are more tech savvy nowadays. People are more naturally inclined at being able to plug stuff in or install stuff or connect wirelessly from one thing to another. It's something that, generally speaking, most people are pretty well versed in, especially in the events industry. So, finding stuff that actually can be deployed easily as well as accessed easily when it comes to that data is
Yes.
two distinct elements, but they've both got to be easy, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, with the 4G sensor we have, it's got a battery in it, we'll run it for 8 hours. Literally, put the aerial on it, turn it on. That's it.
Yeah.
Once the sensor's on, it's always collecting data. Then we create the event on the platform. That takes a few minutes to do. And when we present it to clients, we show them easy steps, and we'll create an event whilst we're demonstrating to them. We'll have a sensor. Let me just turn this on. Right, the event's created. Here we go. It's collecting data. Really? Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's how easy it is. So that takes that fear factor out, because you get a lot of fear from people. As you said, with technology, I'm not sure we want to touch that. Literally, just press the button. It's like turning on your mobile phone.
Absolutely. And as I said at the very start of today's episode, this is I suppose, part 2, you may call it. 6 months ago, we welcomed Rob from Exposure Analytics on to talk about the company, to actually give us a real insight into how the tech worked, how it could be deployed, what it actually did. And 6 months down the line today, we've been speaking to him about some of the successes that the guys have had, 2 wins at the Event Technology Awards, the jump in the figures. And it's been a pleasure to have you back on the show today, Rob.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been great.
If you've carried on plugging through today's episode, despite my direction to go and reference the old episode, please do hop back onto eventindustrynews.com or go into your podcast downloader platform, whichever one you're using, and have a search back to June 2018. That's when we did the first episode with Rob from Exposure Analytics, and you can have a listen to that, and hopefully it'll put into context some of the stuff that we've been talking about today as a lead onto that. So our thanks to Rob Murdoch from Exposure Analytics for joining the podcast again today. The podcast is brought to you by our own sponsor, Engage, powered by D2I Systems, winner of Best Event Management Platform at the 2017 Event Technology Awards. To learn how Engage can make your business more profitable, visit d2isystems.com/engage, which brings us nicely to the end of today's episode, to the end of our second discussion with Rob Murdoch. Rob, thanks again for joining the podcast today.
Thanks, James.
And we'll see all of you and catch up with you all soon. See you soon. Bye-bye.